Out of all the cards in this game's history, this is definitely a card I never thought I'd be talking about. Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a card discussion about Blind Obliteration. Blind Obliteration is a card that really caught my attention after this past weekend for reasons we're going to discuss more in depth as the video goes on. So it's a brand new card out of Code of the Duelist. It's only a rare, so don't expect it to spike in price or anything like that, but it's a really interesting card. So for those of you who don't know, it's a normal trap card which reads, roll a 6-sided die twice and destroy all face-up monsters with levels and ranks lower than the total roll. So essentially you roll 2 dice, and let's say hypothetically you were to roll an 8, then all monsters with levels or ranks that are 7 or below get completely destroyed. So the card you probably want to most similarly compare this to is Torrential Tribute, because it's a board wipe, sometimes I guess, depending on how the roll goes, but it's a board wipe in a trap card that you can essentially use at any time. I guess one of the nice things is it's not an on-summon trigger, so you can pretty much use it at any point that you see fit. But we're going to talk about why this card is good, and what really sparked my inspiration for this video was looking at the deck profiles from YCS Rimini, and what was interesting is that 3 of the top deck profiles that I managed to find, there could have been more, but at the very least there was 3 deck profiles, one of them making the top 8, where this card was being played. And I thought that was really interesting and really cool, and I wanted to kind of delve into some theory on behind why this card was played, why it was valuable, and kind of the role that Blind Obliteration plays in the current meta. So essentially what this card does is it kind of fills a very similar role to Torrential Tribute. But before we get into that, I want to discuss some of the probability and the numbers behind how often this card is going to resolve depending on the type of field you're trying to wipe. So I made a little chart here, and this basically shows that whatever level you're looking for to destroy, let's say your opponent has a field of all level 1 monsters. Well, you're in luck, because since it's mathematically impossible to roll anything less than a 2 with 2 dice, then you're gonna 100% of the time destroy all level 1 monsters on the field. Now, with the way the probability works, the higher the level or the rank of monster you're trying to destroy, the less chance of that happening. And then when you get all the way up to 12, it's a very, very low probability, since you basically have a 1 in 36 chance of rolling a 12 to destroy everything level or rank 11 and below. But what I want you to focus on here with this chart, rather than using it as a reference, is the top portion of the chart, and the fact that, you know, you have a 100% chance to destroy everything that's level 1, you have like a 97% chance to destroy everything level 2, I think it's like 91 or 92% chance to destroy everything level 3, and then you have an 83.3% chance to destroy everything that's level 4, and that's what we're going to be focusing on, specifically that level 4 and below, I suppose, as well, destruction, because this is essentially going to be used against Zodiacs. Now, I know we have the ban list coming up soon, but you can extrapolate the logic from this video and apply it to other decks and archetypes as well, but we're going to use Zodiac here as the primary discussion point, because that's why a lot of players were using this over the weekend. So if you didn't know, and if you weren't familiar too much with the OCG's meta when Zodiac was extremely popular, a lot of OCG players were actually playing Torrential Tribute at 3 copies, and the reason for that is essentially that if you get your board wiped and then they start building up their board, you have a way to respond and completely eradicate their board, and then other than maybe potential back row that your opponent might have as well, then you have free range, and most importantly, you don't have to deal with a card like Zodiac Trident, because that's basically the worst thing you have to deal with outside of their back row. But the fact that you have a Trident in addition to their back row is just fucking stupid. So this is kind of a card that fills the role like a card like Dark Hole or Regeki or Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, because it allows you to just kind of reset the board and take control and give you the initiative to set up your plays. And the fact you can do that on your opponent's turn is really powerful, because you can disrupt them mid-play and you could stop them pretty much. You could just use this card on the end phase if you want, after they do everything, just completely wipe the board clean, and then it's your turn and you can do whatever the fuck you want because they're not going to have anything left. So the fact that this card differs from Torrential Tribute in the fact that it doesn't have an on-summon requirement for it to be activated gives it a little bit more flexibility than a card like Torrential Tribute, because you can decide at what point at any time you have the ability to give a response that you want to wipe their board clean. So let's say, for instance, they were going to go for a Ram, you could hit them on the Chalkanine and wipe the board before Ram gets a chance to get resurrected, and then they're not going to have any board, and Ram's not going to be able to protect them from Blind Obliteration's effect. Another really cool thing about this card as well is that it was ruled at YCS Rimini that My Body is a Shield cannot stop Blind Obliteration, and the reason for that is because that since Blind Obliteration is not guaranteed to destroy monsters on the field, you can't use My Body as a shield in response to it because it's not a sure thing. So this actually gives Blind Obliteration an advantage over cards like Dark Hole, like Regeki, like Kaiju Slumber, hell, even in this instance, Torrential Tribute. And so it goes back to that theory that Blind Obliteration essentially for us TCG players, since we only have one copy of Torrential Tribute available to us and the OCG still has 3, this essentially acts as your second and third copies, hell, even fourth copy if you really want to go that far, of Torrential Tribute. So giving you those extra board wipes, and especially having a board wipe that can dodge My Body as a Shield, essentially since My Body is a Shield is pretty much a guaranteed staple in a highly competitive Zoo meta, is something that's really valuable. But you do have to consider the fact that there are downsides to this card as well. First off, it is a trap. Anytime we're talking about a trap card, that's going to be the first thing I mention, because it is slow and it does take a turn. Now, I am willing to give this card a little bit more leeway because of the fact it's a board wipe in a trap, and because of the fact that it's going to probably go at least +1, maybe even +2 in terms of card advantage, and you're wiping the slate clean, and you have the advantage when it's your turn again to pretty much take control of the game. So while it's a trap, it does have a lot of benefits that not many traps, I would say, have the same advantages as a card like Blind Obliteration or Torrential Tribute. Another thing I don't really like about this card is that it's a card that's really only good if you're behind, and that's another issue I have with a card like Torrential Tribute as well, is that if you're playing trap cards like Solemn Strike, Solemn Warning, Dimensional Barrier, any of these other really powerful trap cards at our disposal, you can use these while you still have an established board, kind of as protection so that you're stopping your opponent but still maintaining board presence. The issue with this card is that unless you have something you're willing to destroy, or your opponent has a board that gets completely overwhelming and they don't have the opportunity to do anything about it, then you kind of have to be in a situation where you're losing for this card to have its maximum value and to kind of put you back in the game, so to speak, and kind of hit that reset button. Next thing is the fact that this card is only meant for specific decks. Now, again, like I said, we're talking about Zodiac in this example because that's primarily what this card is used for, but you do have to remember as well that there might be decks in the future that might have the same application, and you might want to play this card since Torrential Tribute is only at 1 in the TCG, but it's only going to work for decks that have a very low level rank count, because as you can see from the chart, the higher it goes, the much less of a probability you're going to have of this card resolving, and then it's going to give you a much more difficult time, which leads to the biggest issue of this card in the fact that if you don't hit the roll, and if you hit something like a 2 or a 3, this card is absolutely fucking trash, and it's going to be a -1, and it's not going to do anything for you, and it's almost going to lose you a game when that could have been a card that potentially could have done something else. So even though you have an 83.3% chance of this resolving, and to be fair, that is a very high probability, that means like 1 in every like 5 or 6 games that this card isn't going to work. You have to think over the span of a tournament how many games this card isn't going to resolve the way you want it to, that okay, maybe that's something that you can afford to play when the payoff is an entire board wipe. There also are ways to counter this card as well, because anything that pretty much flips monsters face down, like Quaking Mirror Force, Book of Moon, anything like that, is kind of, you know, it doesn't really synergize well with this card, and it's kind of ways that your opponent can maybe possibly play around it. Floodgate Trap Hole is another popular card as well. So if you Floodgate Trap Hole one of your opponent's monsters, and then you also have Blind Obliteration, you know, those cards don't really meld well together. So that's something I want you guys to keep in mind as well. But guys, those are just my thoughts on Blind Obliteration. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this card, and what you think about the fact that it actually made 3 of the lists in the top cut of YCS Rimini. I think that's absolutely incredible. It's cool to see a cool little card like this doing so well, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say. But guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.